Good afternoon, all. I trust everyone is safe and well, and welcome to today's Open Classroom Civil Designer webinar. Thank you to everyone who participated in our earlier one-question poll. Today is Roads Day, which is every Wednesday, with Cameron as your Civil Designer software facilitator. As always, please feel free to use the text chat service on your GoToWebinar floating dialog to ask us any questions you may have during Cameron's presentation. So without further delay, Cameron, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Charles. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the third edition of the Rhodes Open Classroom, where today we'll be looking at components, answering three questions. Why would you want to use components? Where do you find components? And how can you go about manipulating your components? Now in front of us, we've got a really good example of the application of your components. If you, for instance, got a lot of cut and fill and you don't want huge embankments, you could use components. You could use your components as curbs. You could go and put in sidewalks, V-drains, trapezoidal drains, etc. Eventually, what I'm going to show you, if I zoom in to the right-hand side, I'll show you how you could go about manipulating your components, and in this case, to get rid of these gabions and replace them with a height adjustable retaining wall. First off, where would you find components? If you go to your roads mode and you select Tools, Template Editor, you'll see on the left-hand side, we've got a whole library of components that are built in by default. You can either use those components or you can go and create your own components, depending on your design requirements. As you go and select the component on the left-hand side, you can see what your preview looks like. Once you go and specify which active assembly to use, you can then simply click on the expand button and go and select which components to use. And when I do this, you can see how the red arrow indicates the position of your component. Depending on your design requirements, you could then go and customize which components to use. So you could also then just go and right click and select add to template. There's no limitation to the amount of times that you can use a component either. You are not limited to using components only in the edge. If you were to be designing a dual carriageway road, you could also go and specify components in the median. And it's just as easy to go and delete these components. One of the components we're going to focus on today is the retaining wall. And the functionality of your component is really powerful. You could go and specify different cut and fill conditions and see how your retaining wall's height would automatically adjust. I'll show you how you can go about changing your embankment settings too. If you go and select template on the left-hand side, there's the components listed inside your template. So you could, for instance, go and right-click and select edit. And that would then show you the dimensions of your component. Let's look at this in further depth. I'm going to change my diagram. I'm going to Tools and I'm selecting Component Editor. Let's go and add our own components. Looking at a very basic example, I'm going to go and specify the horizontal and vertical dimensions. I'm specifying a negative because I want my line to go down. So this being my start point and that being the end point. If you use your coordinates over here, you can see we've horizontally moved to the right-hand side 600 mils and we move down 300 mils. Drawing the other side of my component. And then I'm going to make that point my end point or stop point. As I go and select the different lines, you can see how they're highlighted on the top. You can go and specify your own quantities. And then you can go and specify a formula by right-clicking and selecting Define Region. Reading my prompt, I indicate the edge. So I simply go and click on the lines, and then once I'm done, I go and right-click. There you can see the formula and the edges used for the formula. The cross-section I'll explain in my next example. And then moving on to Layer Works, I go and right-click here. And as I did with the quantities, I go and define my edges. Right-click to stop. You can put in your own layer description there. Alternatively, you can go and right-click, and if you really want to do a pavement design, we give you the TRH4 spec that is built in by default. You can then go and add layers, edit layers, and delete layers. You can go and shift left and right for your layers. And then looking at our example, we've got the lined layers, and you also have the option of flat layers. Let's go and save that. Next up, let's go and design our retaining wall. So I go and select Add. And instead of specifying horizontal and vertical movement, I'm simply going to right-click and go and select Import from Drawing. I'm going to start tracing my drawing from this corner, and then moving up, I'm going to go and select my various sides. I've gone and specified a varied distance over here because the distance is going to differ depending on my cut and fill conditions. Selecting my sides, and then right-click and add. If I now go and select the different options, you'll see how it's highlighted in my preview. Looking at this first edge over here where I mentioned the dimension will vary, it's a positive value, so I'm going to click on this down arrow and I'm going to select Extract Next. In a case like that, the height will depend on the intersection of the ground line. Scrolling down, I'm going to change that as it's a negative value to negative Extract Next. Clicking elsewhere to see how the diagram updates, and then specifying this as my stop point. You can go and specify a certain color and a certain texture. Going back to quantities, you can divide your retaining wall into different segments. So as an example, I'm just going to go and do the footing here. The formula is written, and I could go and put in footing. Even though the dimensions of the wall will change, civil designers will still calculate your quantities accurately. You also have the option of specifying your own formulas. So you can go and put in the plus, minus, times, divide, etc. Looking at cross-section, here you go and specify which method to use for your cross-sectional quantities. At the moment, my method is below. You can see that the red line is highlighted below my retaining wall. If I go and change that to above, the red line then is indicated on the top of my retaining wall. You can also go and specify your own region. When you select custom, you have the option then of right-clicking here and defining your own region. If you go and select through, you'll see that there's a continued line straight through. You also have the option of customizing a stop on grade. In a case like that, it would use the existing grade. Let's say this line was going up, it would continue with that grade and it would intersect the component on the far side. Let's go and save that again. I've saved it under demo style. If I go back to Tools, Template Editor, go and right click and select Add Ground. That is currently what our template looks like. So I'll go and specify I want a left cut. And you can go and put in your different conditions by selecting Add Condition. But to come back to our components, I want a vertical embankment, and that embankment must change according to my cut and fill. I go to Add Edge. I change my vertical to ground intersect, and I leave my slope as 0. Pressing Escape to cancel. In a case like this, it doesn't matter the amount of cut, that embankment will continue to intersect the ground level. I could then go to my retaining wall that we've just created, left click, hold it in, and then move it to my road edge. And it would then be placed in accordingly. Keeping that in mind, let's go and look at our current road template. Closing my CAD drawing and returning to our project. If I go back to Tools, Template Paths, right click and select Template Editor, I've got a left cut condition here, greater than 6 meters of cut. So if I go and put in my ground level greater than 6 meters of cut, I'll have my retaining wall. Let's go and close this and focus in on the design. And then go to Section, Graphical Edit. If I go to my display lines, you'll see there's an option of cut fill indicator, and I'll put in a tolerance of 5 meters. So in that case, you will see that there's red arrows on the sides, and that is the cut depth to shoulder breakpoint or the full height to shoulder breakpoint. If that height exceeds 5 meters, then you will see your display being highlighted in red. If it is below 5 meters, it stays gray. I can then go and look at my design. On the left hand side, it may be that you don't want to put in retaining wall, but if you go further down, you can see we've got a cut here that is greater than 5 meters. So my indicator is displayed in red. So in a case like this, it may not be a good idea to use gabions, but to rather replace them with the retaining wall. And that's what we'll do. Going back to the first gabion, you can either make changes graphically in this cross-section, or you can do it via a spreadsheet. On the left-hand side, the last icon is your component editor. Go and select that. On the left-hand side, you're given a list of your current road components. If you've got components with duplicated names, Civil Designer will automatically go and put in the $signs. If you're looking for particular components that aren't part of the list, you can then go and click on Load Components and go and select components from a library. On our cross section, we want to change the left-hand side gabions into a retaining wall. So I go and select left cut fill. I go to this last component and I'm going to change it to the retaining wall. Then I'm going to go to my gabions and I'm going to delete them. As I do this, look at the retaining wall and you'll see how it grows. If I look at the right-hand side, I've got a trapezoidal drain that I want to use on the left-hand side as well. So I click on this down arrow and I replace the V drain with the trapezoidal drain. It may be a good idea also to go and shift my retaining wall a bit to the left to make place for this trapezoidal drain. So I'm going to go and right-click here, go and select Insert, click on the down arrow and select an edge. And to end off with, I'm going to go and change my slope. If I go and close this, select my cross section and then press page down, I'll get a confirmation message if I want to save the changes or not. In this case, I'm then going to select yes. If you've got numerous cross sections, you preferably don't want to do them individually. You'd rather go to the spreadsheet, go to Alignment, Edge Levels, Edit Super. On the bottom of this spreadsheet, you'll see the different tabs for your components. Let's go and select Left Cut Fill. Scrolling down to the applicable chainage. You can see that the cross section that I went and edited is now highlighted in green for me. If I go and right click, you've got numerous options available to you. I'm then going to select the components I want to delete. Right click, delete component. I can select a whole lot of random components and then go and right click, replace component. So I want to replace the V drain with my trapezoidal drain. Alternatively, I can go and select a group of cells, go and right click, edit component, and go and select the edge. I could also go and select components, insert components, but in this case I'm then delete that first and then go and insert. You also have the option to go and right click and select range in plan. You would zoom into the appropriate plan position, go and left click your start range and your end range, and those components would be highlighted for you. The last option I want to show you is TrackCursor. You will see how in the plan view would dynamically update in the position where I've gone and clicked. Right, let's go and close the edge control spreadsheet, save it, and redesign our road. In doing so, you can see our design has been updated and we don't have the gabions on this side of the road anymore. Something I need to point out, if you go back to area volume and apply a template, let me go and put in a certain range. The program will ask for confirmation. Do you want to apply the template to the manually edited changes? If you say yes, you override the changes you've made. So in our case, we want to keep the changes we've made, so we select no. Looking at our cross sections, I can go back to section, graphical edit, and as I go and press page down, you'll see that the gabions have been replaced by the retaining wall. Looking at our quantities, if you go to area volume, there's an option of component quantities. If I go to my output window, there's my quantities listed. At the same time, I could go back to area volume, component layer work quantities, specify start and end chainage. Alternatively, you could go back to our report quantities functionality. Once you've right-clicked and you select recalculate, you can then go to your components and go browse through your quantities. Returning to the 3D view. And as you can see, there's not another brick in the retaining wall. Thanks very much for your time, ladies and gentlemen. Until next week, cheers for now. Back to you, Charles.
Thank you, Cameron, and to all who attended today's webinar. For those who missed the one question poll upon arrival, a one question survey will be launched after this webinar asking the same question. Please take a quick moment to answer. Please remember to renew your work from home licenses and please follow the Civil Designer software page on LinkedIn. See you all tomorrow at the same time and place using the same link for the Stormwater class. Thank you and goodbye.